Hello and welcome to the Cape and Cowl podcast. This is episode 9. There has definitely been a bit of a hiatus in the episodes. I think it's been about 3 weeks since we last recorded. Basically, I didn't feel like there was really enough new, interesting things to talk about to warrant an episode, and I really value your guys' time, and I didn't want to, as much as I tend to ramble, I didn't want to just force an episode out that didn't have, in my opinion, valuable topics. But now, honestly, we have more than enough to talk about, where I have probably a couple podcasts worth of episode ready to go. Just off the top of my head, we've got Batman Who Laughs that came out, the October mini set, we got some new comics, we got some balance changes that came out last patch, a bit of a bug situation going on. We're not going to get to all these topics today, but we're going to cover as much as we can. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is the balance changes that we got in the most recent patch. Those balance changes were Flashpoint going from a bronze that I think added one additional card, so a bronze +1 draw, to a gold card with no +1, so that is a pretty big change. Hellblaze went from 4 damage to everything to 4 damage to all recruits and 2 damage to leaders. We saw Brainiac go from a 5/5 to a 6/7, so that's quite good. I think there was one more change that I'm missing, but off the top of my head, I don't think it was anything too noteworthy. Really, the main things that stand out was the Hellblaze change and the Flashpoint change. So I wanted to talk about those changes specifically, but also my opinion on the balance as a whole. First things first, I've been kind of screaming from the rooftops that I did not expect them to change more than, 1 or 2 cards in this balance patch. Do I personally think that there was more things that should be changed? Yes, but also the things that I think need to be changed are not what people commonly think need to be changed, so, everybody has their own opinion on that front. But I think the developers have been pretty transparent that their goal is to change the meta and buff things and change things by releasing new cards. We get 1 new card every week in the comics, and then every month we get 10 new cards in the mini set. And I believe in the perfect world, the developers would prefer to actually just never make balance changes and have new cards be the source of changing. And I think that is a noble approach. I agree with the approach, but obviously sometimes you need to step in and make some changes. I think Flashpoint was a pretty obvious example of something that they need to step in and make some changes. So let's, I guess, start with Flashpoint as a whole. Flashpoint going from a bronze to a gold seems like a very huge nerf, but honestly it was one that I was kind of, I don't want to say expecting, but that I had pitched from the beginning. And I know it sounded crazy to say it could be a gold card and still be playable, but it could be a gold card and still be playable. And I think the developers agree. Now, I think it's important to make a distinction now from what Flashpoint was to what Flashpoint is. Flashpoint as a bronze was a lot of things. It was the single strongest combo card in the game, allowing Poison Ivy to deal between 5 and 7 damage to each leader as early as, turn 2, turn 3. And forget if you double, if you Flashpointed into Flashpoint, because you could basically just end the game on turn 2 or turn 3. So that much damage. It was supercharging for Cyborg, because typically when you play Cyborg deck, your first activation, you usually use it on a recruit because it doesn't do anything meaningful to leaders. And then Cyborg, you want your second and potentially your third activation to be your killing shots on recruits. Flashpoint made it so that your first Cyborg activation was a kill shot and your second, so it sped up Cyborg's game plan tremendously. But not just those 2 combo potentials, and then there's the obvious, I believe the intended original use of playing Shazam, accumulating lightning bolts in your deck, you play Flashpoint, you get all of those lightning bolts into your hand, and then you can burst through them and basically recycle those free lightning bolts into new cards. So there's just that kind of good general purpose use for Flashpoint. But also, I think Flashpoint was, and this is kind of a shame because it now loses that utility, Flashpoint was like a hand reset. So if I, drew some early cards and my hand was like gold, Flashpoint. A lot of the times, if you drew a bricked hand like that, and again, maybe that's a deck building issue, But if you drew a bricked hand like that, a lot of those times you just lose those games. Whereas Flashpoint allowed you to hit that reset button. It was like a second mulligan. You spent a resource, you got rid of your old hand, and now you get a whole bunch of new cards, ideally more playable cards, or if you're looking for a specific out, you had the chance to cycle and try and find that. That use of Flashpoint is now dead. Flashpoint has kind of fully solidified itself as purely a combo/finisher card. So it makes Flashpoint a little bit interesting as well, because making Flashpoint a gold card means you are delaying the first turn you can play Flashpoint by, 3-4 turns at a minimum, if not longer. Now, the power ceiling of Flashpoint stays largely the same, but in a normal game of Dual Force, where, we're going back and forth, I need to stay alive. Even if I'm a combo deck that's trying to use my Ivy plants plus Flashpoint to finish you off, I still need to stay alive to get to that point, which means I need to expend cards answering your board. So, the second part of Flashpoint, besides the fact that in a vacuum the card is just as powerful, by the time gold turns come around, unless you're playing something like a Tactics where you can usually do pretty well at keeping your hand full, in all other Ivy scenarios, especially things like Shazam we've been seeing, and which you would need Shazam if you're going to actually play Flashpoint, so the Bat Ivy use doesn't even come into play here, but Bat Ivy is just the only one that really keeps the hand full. If you're going Shazam Ivy trying to go for the Flashpoint finisher, it's much harder to now have a very full hand when Flashpoint comes online. So it's not just that it's delayed, which gives your opponents more chance to answer you, it's the fact that delaying it into the late game means that it's way harder to have a more meaningful amount of cards in your hand. Which, you can still make the argument that even if I had 7 cards in the past and now I only have 4 cards, those 4 cards are more likely to be Lightning Bolt since I probably activated Shazam once or twice. And that's fair, that's absolutely true. But it's much harder to pull that off. You need to either have more things go your way, your opponent needs to be playing much slower. So Flashpoint really is kind of the same card. It's just obviously slower. You need to have a particular game state occur in order to pull it off. I honestly think it was a pretty solid nerf. It does stink to lose the hand reset utility, but I don't think there's any way to keep that without functionally changing the card. And I mean functionally as in programmatically the way the card operates within the game engine. They would have had to code in a new type of function being replace or transform cards instead of draw. And A, I don't know if that was worth the development effort, and B, that might be confusing for new players. So I think while that may have been a more quote-unquote elegant change to the card, I think it would have been a much higher effort and much more likely to confuse people, so I could see why they did not go in that direction, as much as I would not have minded that either. Now, as far as the Hellblaze change, it is I don't want to say minimal change, but it's a much smaller change than it looks. Obviously, you're cutting out 4 total damage, 2 from each leader, and that is not inconsequential, but I think the thing that most people did not realize is despite Hellblaze being a pseudo-finisher, the power of Hellblaze came from decimating your board. The leader damage is bonus, and it's great, don't get me wrong, but the power of Hellblaze is, in the late game, we're all low on resources, Hellblaze clears your board. Yeah, it does some chip damage as well, but now you lost 4 recruits, and I lost none. That's the power of Hellblaze. The leader damage is bonus. And basically, it was exactly what I said, is if you change Hellblaze at all, even if you got rid of the leader damage, Flash Doomsday and other energy burn decks, they're just going to switch to Living Lightning, and they're going to feel just fine about it. So personally, I would not have really changed Hellblaze much at all. I think the target should have been the earlier/cheaper burn damage. I've been a big proponent that Energy Blast should just not go face, and then you could maybe have done a Hellblaze change on top of that. At some point, we may necessitate Lightning Bolts needing to go to 1 damage, although that is a huge nerf for Shazam and a lot of energy cards. But just as we're hitting critical densities of Lightning Bolts, that day may come. I don't think we're there yet. But, major point is just to say, I had been telling people for a while that we were not going to get a lot of changes, and that if all we got was a couple changes to energy, things were not going to change as much as people thought. And, people jumped down my throat for saying that, but now I think we can see we are around a week, maybe a little bit less than a week. We're about 5 days post new cards, and personally, I've had really not too much change. I still see Flash Doomsday a whole lot. And I guess maybe we're going to start getting... I'm not going to cover all of the new cards in this podcast. I want to save that. I think I might be having Obi John back on, and him and I will talk about the new cards and things like that. But as far as the new cards go, I think the only real effect I've seen it have on the meta is Zatanna Ivy getting a lot more play with the kind of Morgane combo potential. I definitely think it's strong. I just don't know how strong that deck is. I think it's seeing a lot of play because it's flashy, it's cool, it's fun. I guess we'll see how strong it really is and if it becomes a mainstay. Other than that, the Hellblaze nerf did not really weaken Flash Doomsday. Flash Doomsday is still strong. It's still playable. You're still going to see it a decent amount. It weakened... Hellblaze nerf didn't weaken... The Flashpoint nerf weakened your Shazam Ivy, so you'll see that less. But really all it did was bump Shazam Ivy down and bump up, which in my opinion was the better deck anyway, Shazam Batman, which is now even more popular. And on top of that, all of the energy decks as a whole, even before the nerfs, had been kind of on a downswing, while people were remembering that Aquaman is the second best, if not the best leader in the game, and Batman is still the best leader in the game. So really, before the balance changes even came in, energy was kind of seeing itself, I don't want to say seeing itself out, but seeing itself a bit lower, while Batman was, doing his normal, being seen everywhere. Aquaman was seeing his resurgence. Really, I don't think we even... Flashpoint, again, change it because it was a high roll that feels really bad, but other than that, I don't think energy was a problem this season at all. Or the cards that might have been a problem in energy weren't ones that you would be changing. I think we got ourselves, and I'm going to say we as the community as a whole, even though I did not hold this stance, we got ourselves all worked up into thinking that energy was this super OP, unbeatable faction, and people didn't realize that the meta was shifting, and people were answering and people were countering, and yes, Flash Doomsday is still around, so, it looks like it is a quote-unquote energy problem, but I don't think that's a top deck. I think that's just a deck people use to take advantage of either Perfect Hand being a very high win rate and taking advantage of unrefined opponents' decks. But other than Flash Doomsday, I didn't see a lot of energy decks, let alone good energy decks, at least during my personal climb. I'm not going to get too much into my data. That might be another episode, maybe closer towards the end of the season. I want to try and collect more data. I only tracked my climb so far. I'm going to track more stuff soon. But personally, my climb was a huge percentage Batman Aquaman, and anything that wasn't Batman Aquaman was like Batman plus something else. We got a couple of other random things over time, and now the caveat being my climb was completely before the balance changes in the mini set, so I don't have a lot of data on that stuff. I would assume the Zatanna Ivy percentages have gone way up, but I've been telling people from the beginning, we can ignore Aquaman, although I think Aquaman falls into the same camp as Batman, but not so as severe. Batman has the single largest impact on the meta. I know he's popular, and a lot of people try and write it off as, Batman's popular, and that's why you see him everywhere. It's not just that. He is the best leader in the game. He does everything. He is control. He is mid-range. He is aggro. He is value. He is everything. Every single thing a leader could be, Batman is, and he does them all fairly well. He pairs with everything. He covers every weakness. He is the single biggest factor on the meta. And I think people are starting to come around and see it, although I still don't think people want to see him change because everybody likes him. But Batman is stronger than energy ever was. I'm telling you right now. You don't have to listen to me. You don't have to believe me. But Batman, and honestly, even Aquaman, are stronger, more powerful, have a bigger impact on the game and on the meta than energy ever has. That's not to say that the devs need to go, nuke both of those leaders, but it's to say, if you're expecting balance changes to change things, if balance changes do not come specifically at, if not both of those leaders, specifically at Batman and how Batman interacts with tactics as a whole, if that does not get changed, you will not see ripple effects throughout the meta. Unless your other two options are to massively buff another leader so that tactics just cannot breathe. Although the most likely thing would be like, let's say, for example, they just took Black Adam and they changed him to 5 charges because they wanted to make him super overpowered. Do you think Black Adam would replace Batman? No. You know what would happen? People are just going to play Batman with Black Adam. That's what's going to happen. Anything that gets good, people are just going to pair Batman with what's good because Batman makes what's good better, and Batman covers whatever's good's weaknesses are. He covers those weaknesses as well. So you're never going to see large-scale meta changes until Batman changes. I'm not saying the developers are going to change him. They might not. But until Batman changes, do not expect changes to happen through balance changes. The only other way is to release such good cards for other factions, super good energy cards, super good might cards. You have to push enough super good cards outside of tactics where there are more and more viable leader combinations that don't require Batman to get going. And we may be seeing that now with Ivy and Zatanna getting enough support where they're going to kind of try and stand on their own. Again, we have to see if that withstands, the test of time. But if that deck sticks around, that's an example of magical spells got enough support with Jason Blood being released. Giovanni already existed, and now they've got Morgane. If you put all of that stuff in, obviously you can't play Batman because you need both energy and tyranny to make that combination happen. If you make that combination and you do more stuff like that, that is a way of pushing down Batman or even, to an extent, Aquaman's play rate without directly nerfing them, is to give everything else very strong stuff. Now, don't get me wrong, that is a very tight rope to walk, because the difference between blatantly power creeping other things so that you can reduce those and doing it kind of, I don't know the best word, but doing it elegantly where you are making things stronger without strictly power creeping the game, it is a very, very tough rope to walk. I'm not saying it's impossible, and I definitely think developers can do it, but it is a tough rope to walk. And it may be a more palatable rope to walk for the player base because nobody wants to see Batman change. At least that's what I've gathered from my discussions with the community. So we might have to go that route of continuously giving other faction combinations powerful things that they have to do together without tactics and Batman. But that still leaves one glaring problem. And that glaring problem is, what do you do with tactics? Because yes, I can push a bunch of other combinations that don't use tactics together so that Batman sees less play. But anytime tactics is in the conversation, there is basically no world where you build a tactics deck that Batman doesn't just do it better. You look at Green Arrow and he's supposed to be endless value and a good control leader, and he is. But in general, you're better off just playing Batman. Why play Green Arrow? Or, if you're doing specifically Cyborg combo, obviously Cyborg can only do that. But other than that, if you're not going all in on the combo, why would you play Cyborg over Batman? You're not going to. And then Batgirl, as much as I think Batgirl is underrated, and there are specific niche decks that she can run, specifically the deploy type stuff, if you're not going all in on deploys, why are you running Batgirl? Everything just comes down to Batman does what all the other tactics leaders do, but better, unless it's a specific niche combo scenario. So, you still have the problem of, within tactics, Batman will still hold everything down, but you can at least fix the rest by giving the other factions more powerful combinations to play together without tactics. You still at some point need to figure out how you can give some cards to tactics to let the other leaders see some shine without Batman. But I think that is the only avenue where we don't nerf Batman, don't nerf Aquaman, and we still see meaningful meta changes, I think, is by giving everything more powerful options that Batman can't take advantage of, which is, like I said, very, very tough to pull off. Next thing that I wanted to talk about, and I would be remiss if I did not talk about it, is the bugs. We've been seeing a lot of bugs lately. They've been cropping up a bit, more and more. Some old bugs are coming back. Some new bugs are showing up. And I think it's time to talk about them. I think I'd be doing you guys a disservice if I didn't. So things like the end turn bug. I think there's 2 end turn bugs now. One was your turn ending automatically. I think that is more rare, but I think people have seen it. And then there's, I think, what is a new end turn bug, where you physically cannot end your turn and you have to wait out the entire rope. At least the game continues, but you have to wait out your entire rope. Those 2 have been popping up. I think there has been a bug with not being able to place your cards in specific tiles or something like that. That one I think is more rare, but still happens. And then the grapnel gun bug, where your hand disappears or cards disappear, I think has been creeping back up. So those are some old bugs that are coming back, and there are some new bugs, specifically around deploy effects. And the reasoning for that is the developers recently made a change, and I believe this is kind of like an engine level change, so like the core rule system of the game around being able to cancel recruits that have a single deploy effect, or like a single target deploy effect, being able to bounce them back to hand. There are some bugs with that, and I think those bugs are, I'm going to say encouraging, but encouraging might be a little too positive. I'm glad to see stuff like that because it means that they are taking the time to get the stuff under the hood right. It could have been easy to just ride with deploy how it was, never make those improvements, never make the speed up, because I don't know if you guys have noticed, yes, there are a lot more bugs, but the game as a whole is performing a lot better. Interactions are quicker, card draw animations are happening faster, actions on the board are resolving more quickly. It used to feel like you would target something and then the game would have to calculate it behind the scenes and figure out what to do. All of that stuff has gotten a lot better, which tells me that developers are under the hood, behind the scenes, fixing things up, redoing systems, improving things, which is a good thing because that's the kind of stuff we need for the future. The obvious downside is, in the short term, we are seeing an uptick in some issues while those things are worked through. And that's obviously frustrating. That's not even touching the Exola issues that people have had with, renewing their monthly subscription. I guess quick detour. If you had any issues with your Exola renewal, whether that is, I was in the boat where they charged me twice, then they refunded both of my charges, and then they canceled my membership. So it didn't net cost me any money, but I had to resubscribe. I saw some people, obviously, if you paid with your credit card or debit card, it takes a couple days for the refunds to get in there. So after your cancellation email, give them a couple days. But in general, if you had any issues and you either didn't receive your mini set, your login rewards aren't working, you're just not sure and you want to double check, reach out to support. Obviously, they're going through it, so they may be a little bit delayed. But they are working hard to make sure all the Exola issues are cleared out. Just wanted to do a quick sidebar on that. Just make sure you reach out if you're having any issues or your issues are not yet resolved. But the major point that I wanted to make was, when I was kind of scoping out a timeline in my head, I was somewhat expecting that early October, around the time this mini set came out, we were going to see the early access for Epic and Steam launch as well. I had no, insider information making me think that. I was just thinking, from a business perspective, if I was not listening to the feedback of the development team and just trying to force things out for marketing and profit, that's when I expected Epic and Steam to launch, even if the game wasn't ready. So the fact that those things have not happened yet, in my opinion, is a good sign. I think it is a sign that whoever is making the decisions is listening to the feedback of the development team when they say, listen, we want to make a good first impression when we do launch on Epic and Steam. We need a little bit more time to make sure we get all this stuff right. And that's not just stomping out these bugs that keep, resurfacing over time. Obviously, all of that stuff needs to be permanently stomped out and not come back up. But also, things like redoing the deploy system behind the scenes, these kind of like functional engine changes that are setting up the foundation of the game for the future, allowing the development team time to get that foundation as solid as possible, I think is super necessary, both for long-term health of the game and just the short-term first impression when this game launches on Epic and Steam. So that is a kind of long roundabout way of saying, I know the bugs are frustrating. I know them popping up is not good. It's not your job, but if you have the ability, when you see these bugs pop up, what I would suggest is either go in Discord, go to email, you can send it to me and I'll send it to developers. Write down everything you can remember about when it happened. So you can say like, I got the end turn bug, I was playing these two leaders, and on the turn before the end turn bug first happened, these are some of the actions that I took. If you can remember all of that, fantastic. The more information, the better. For example, and there may be a correlation just because of popularity, but the end turn bug seems to happen almost, if not exclusively, a super high percentage of the time when people are playing Batman. Which tells me, and again, Batman is super popular, so that could be like a false correlation. But my hunch is it is something with either gadgets or leader abilities that either generate cards or, have that seek functionality. So I'm not sure if you see the bug with like Zatanna, for example. She's not as popular as Batman though. But I also believe that the cards disappearing bug and stuff like that in the past was tied to grapnel gun and other gadgets. So like, in my opinion, I think there is something there, some sort of link between Batman and the gadgets and some of these bugs. That's not to say, it's your job to report all this stuff, but the more information you can get to the development team, the higher likelihood that they can get fixes for this stuff, and permanent fixes. But yes, I know the bugs are frustrating. They're not fun to deal with. I consider myself pretty lucky because in general, I almost never see any bugs, but I do, I obviously believe all of you, and I see your screenshots and stuff like that. But I can only imagine how frustrating it is if you see that stuff very often. But I just want to say, as much patience as you can give the dev team, the better, because it's at least encouraging to me that it seems like they are being given the time to get things right rather than force this out the door for maximum profit. And I think there is something to be said for how good that is for the future of the game. And hopefully, obviously, you don't get unlimited time, but hopefully they get enough time to keep this stuff going. One final thing I wanted to raise today, next episode we'll probably talk about, I want to talk with Obi about Batman Who Laughs and the new mini set, so we'll probably talk exclusively about those two things. I'm probably going to loop back to the last couple comics we've got, because I do have some thoughts, although in general it's just, comics good. But we have 2 waves of Twitch drops starting soon. I think the first one starts on around October 18th, I believe. That one is accessible to everyone, and what I mean by that is anyone streaming the game, you'll be able to get the Twitch drops from them. There is a second wave of Twitch drops that I believe starts on October 30th, and that is going to be only with specific registered streamers with Dual Force. Not that you have to be in like a special club, but to be registered, you basically just have to hit platinum rank and fill out a form, I believe, with the developers, and then they'll give you the approval. I think that may be to counter some of the 24/7 AFK streams that are happening. But either way, there are 2 waves of Twitch drops happening this month. A whole host of stuff. Alternate art leaders, card backs, Omni cards, Atoms, deluxe cards, you name it, and it'll be accessible for you this month. So definitely keep your eyes out for when that stuff starts. There's a news story on Dual Force's website that'll give you all the dates and a full breakdown of all the rewards. Even if you don't love, watching streamers, I highly suggest that you tune in at least for enough time to get those rewards, because it is an extremely generous amount of rewards. I think you were getting enough stuff to like craft a ultimate card, plus your deluxes, plus your omnis, plus the alt arts, all that stuff. Like, there's so much good stuff. you'd be silly not to just get it. It's free. All you have to do is, use the bandwidth to watch the streamer. So definitely make sure you don't miss out on those Twitch drops. But yeah, that's all I got for today, guys. We have a whole lot more topics to discuss in next episode. We'll probably have one episode and then maybe take a week off because I have to go back to New Jersey for a wedding in a couple weeks. But we'll definitely try hard to have an episode out next week, and if I can, we'll continue the weekly episodes as long as there's enough content to talk about. But for sure, between Batman Who Laughs, comics, and the mini set, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about next episode anyway. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening. Let me know down below, either in the Spotify Q&A or through YouTube comment section, if there's any topics or questions or anything you want to see covered in the next podcast episode. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you guys next week.